ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Admiral Cross. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Do we have a nice day for this, or what? This is delightful. Delightful. I was told last year it was rainy and somewhat unpleasant here, so we're very lucky indeed. Senator Webb, Mr. Price, other distinguished officials, my fellow military veterans, my fellow Vietnam veterans, and ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you very much for inviting me here today to speak on behalf of the Vietnam veterans. It's quite an honor and a privilege to do so, and I hope I represent you well. Obviously, in preparation for the event today, I did a little reminiscing about my Vietnam days. Seems like quite a while ago, actually, when I was thinking about it, but I looked at some old pictures and things that my wife had put in boxes and said, you don't need to look at these anymore anyway, but I did, and it certainly brought back some interesting memories. I suppose, like many of us in the Vietnam era, I came of age during those days. I was a 23-year-old, newly trained, newly caught Navy fighter pilot who had a new wife, relatively new wife, and a 1-month-old son. As I prepared for my first deployment there, I didn't know quite what to expect in the skies over Vietnam, although I had heard many of the stories from my contemporaries, as you can imagine. But I was determined to do my duty to the best of my ability, as I was trained to do. So, in September 1969, I flew my F-4 Phantom aboard USS Coral Sea, and we headed west to the Tonkin Gulf on a deployment that lasted almost a year. A year filled with excitement, challenge, and indeed some sorrow as well at the loss of too many of my shipmates. Upon return to San Diego after that year, I must tell you that I was quite shocked to see my son, who was then 13 months old, walking and talking as best 1-year-old can talk. And so it was a shock to me, and certainly a great joy at the same time. After a very short 8-month turnaround, I said goodbye to my pregnant wife again. These were our prolific years. And deployed once again, this time on board USS Midway. These were exciting times for a young guy like me. But I learned some important lessons about life as well. Lessons like the satisfaction of doing something bigger than yourself. The importance of serving a purpose for which you have great passion. And the importance of earning the trust and confidence of your peers that you can then draw upon yourself in times of great difficulty and challenge. These same lessons have served me well throughout my life. So, ladies and gentlemen, what a contrast in the environment between the Vietnam days and today. Let's face it, the late 60s and early 70s were a tough time to be in the military. The public perception of men and women in the military was often neutral to negative, and wearing your uniform off base often led to somewhat unpleasant experiences. I remember one myself at they used to call National Airport, now Reagan National Airport. My mom died during my first deployment, so I flew home for that. And as I was on my way back to my unit at National Airport, standing there in my uniform with my wife at my side and holding my infant son, people would walk by and say, call me names like baby killers and how much blood do you have on your hands and other such comments. It was a tough time. The job environment was tough too, I must tell you. There was a much more authoritarian leadership and management style in those days, which created kind of a tense environment within the organization, especially between officers and enlisted. The high tempo of operations that we were undergoing at that time resulted in relatively poor material conditions of our ships and the airplanes that we flew, which adversely affected mission readiness in several ways. And yes, I must tell you, there was an occasional feeling of futility in fighting an unpopular war where political agendas too often disregarded sound military advice, judgment, and strategy. Now, flash forward 40 years. Wow, what a difference in the environment that we enjoy today. Today, our all-volunteer military is the finest trained, best led, best equipped, best maintained, most highly capable, and most highly motivated military force in the world. In contrast to my experience at National Airport, Americans today in airports very often stand up and clap when they see a soldier walk by. And our soldiers regularly receive care packages from strangers they've never met from across the country, with the simple but powerful message with each one of those packages: we know and we care. So how did we get here in just a short one generation of soldiers? Well, obviously there are very many factors involved, but certainly I believe the establishment of the all-volunteer force in the 1970s was the driving factor of where we are today. But I submit to you that the building of the Vietnam Memorial Wall, dedicated 26 years ago yesterday, was also a key factor. This striking monument, with the names of 58,000 men and women who died during the Vietnam War, became not only a place of remembrance for the Vietnam vets and their families, but also a catalyst for change in the perception of the American people who could look at that wall and understand and appreciate the service, sacrifice, patriotism of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who served their country well in the 1960s and the 1970s. This understanding and recognition of the service and sacrifice of our Vietnam vets form an integral part of the foundation upon which today's extraordinary military is built. You, our Vietnam vets, are among the bricks and mortar of that foundation. You should be justifiably proud of your role in our nation's history. Thank you. Thank you to all the military veterans here today and across the country, and to all the brave young men and women who are currently serving our country around the world, many in harm's way. Let us never forget what they do for us. And a very special thanks to my fellow Vietnam vets. Welcome.